Her little girl hadn't eaten all day. The fridge was empty. The only food she had left could keep her child alive tonight. But instead, she handed it to a stranger freezing on the sidewalk. Everyone thought he was just another homeless man. But in that single moment, without knowing it, she changed the course of her entire life. And what happened next, no one could have seen coming. Before we jump in, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? And what kind of story do you crave next? Drop your answer in the comments below. If stories like this grip your heart and refuse to let go, well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I've got another powerful story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now let's get into today's story. The wind cut through the city streets like knives, carrying with it the sting of December's first true cold. Claire adjusted the thin jacket wrapped around her daughter, Lily, as they hurried home from the grocery store. The bag she carried was light, too light for comfort. A few cans of soup, a box of cereal, and milk. She had stretched every dollar, but the worry still sat heavy on her chest like an unspoken secret. She kept her smile steady for Lily, pointing out the holiday lights strung across the shops, the twinkle of reds and golds dancing in her little girl's wide eyes. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, her voice bright with effort. Lily nodded, clutching her mother's hand tightly. Claire squeezed back, grateful for that small warmth. She had promised herself, no matter how hard things got, her daughter would feel loved, protected, safe. Just a block away, slumped against the brick wall of an abandoned storefront, sat a man who seemed swallowed by the night. His coat was frayed, his boots worn thin, his face hidden beneath weeks of unshaven beard. People walked past him as if he were invisible, eyes fixed forward, their pace quickening in avoidance. A cardboard sign leaned against his knees, the ink smeared from snow, hungry. "Please help." He didn't lift his head when they passed. Didn't ask for anything. Just sat, silent and still, like part of the city's forgotten architecture. Claire hesitated. Her steps slowed. She knew that stillness, the weight of being overlooked. But she also knew the grocery bag in her hand was all she had for the week. Her daughter tugged gently, urging her forward. Across the street, holiday music poured from a shop, muffled by the glass. A world of comfort, warmth and plenty, just beyond reach. Claire exhaled a shaky breath and turned her eyes back to the man. Something in her heart refused to let her walk past. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story. All she saw was a human being, shivering alone in the cold. And in that quiet decision, to stop instead of walk on, everything began to change. She bent down, shifting the grocery bag in her arm as the stranger finally lifted his eyes to meet hers. For the briefest second, Claire faltered. His eyes, deep, piercing, a startling blue that seemed to carry both exhaustion and something unspoken, met hers, and the world around them dulled. She had expected dullness, the vacant stare of someone too beaten down to notice kindness. Instead, his gaze startled her, clear despite the grime and the shadow of beard. "Are you hungry?" she asked softly. His throat worked as if words wanted to come, but he only nodded, almost imperceptibly. Claire glanced at Lily, whose curious eyes darted between them. The little girl tilted her head, then whispered, "Mommy, he's cold." The grocery bag weighed heavy in Claire's hands. She had only bought what they needed, nothing extra. But her daughter's words pressed harder than hunger in her own belly. She crouched, balancing the bag against her knee, and pulled out the loaf of bread she had intended for Lily's school lunches. She tore off half and held it out. The man's hand, shaking with either cold or hesitation, reached forward. For a moment he seemed almost unwilling to take it, as though pride and desperation fought inside him. Then he accepted, his fingers brushing hers, and whispered in a voice so low it was nearly carried away by the wind, "Thank you." It wasn't just gratitude. There was weight in those two words, a roughness that suggested it had been a long time since he'd spoken them and meant them. Claire smiled faintly. "It's just bread." But to him, it wasn't. His chest tightened, a flicker of emotion in his eyes quickly hidden as he tore a piece from the loaf and placed it carefully in his mouth, chewing slowly as if tasting something rare. Lily crouched beside her mother, her small mittened hand tugging at the hem of Claire's coat. Can he come home with us, Mommy? Claire's breath caught. She shook her head gently, whispering, "Sweetheart, we don't even." She trailed off, words tangled between the reality of their own struggles and the child's innocent compassion. The man, startled, looked at Lily with something close to awe. Not pity. Not shame. Something else, a memory, perhaps. He cleared his throat. "She's kind," he said, his voice raspy, carrying the rhythm of someone unaccustomed to speaking much. Claire stood, shifting the bag higher in her arms. "We should go," she murmured, half to herself. She didn't owe this stranger anything more, and yet walking away felt heavier than staying. The man lowered his gaze again, curling slightly inward, preparing for her departure like he had prepared for countless others. But Lily, undeterred, leaned closer and said clearly, "Mister, don't be sad." Something broke in his stillness then, a crack in the carefully held mask. His lips trembled into the faintest, reluctant smile. "I'll try," he murmured, more to the ground than to her. Claire placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, urging her gently toward home, but she hesitated once more. From the pocket of her coat, she pulled out the small thermos she carried for herself. It was filled with chicken noodle soup she had planned for their dinner. She unscrewed the cap, the steam rising in the cold night, and handed it to him. "Warm yourself with this," she said firmly, almost like an order. This time, he didn't argue. He wrapped both hands around the thermos as though it were made of gold. When the first sip touched his lips, his eyes closed, and for a fleeting second, Claire saw something raw and unguarded, gratitude so profound it looked almost painful. She didn't know why her heart clenched watching him. She didn't know why she couldn't simply walk away. But she knew this moment mattered, though she couldn't yet see how. As she guided Lily toward home, the man's eyes followed them, the steam from the thermos rising between them like a quiet promise. That night, Claire lay awake on the worn couch in their tiny apartment, listening to the steady hum of the radiator and Lily's soft breathing from the bedroom. Her mind wouldn't quiet. She replayed the man's face, his eyes, his voice when he said "thank you." She had seen many struggling souls in this city, but something about him was different. His presence lingered like a question unanswered. Meanwhile, on the cold sidewalk, the man, Daniel, sat with the thermos held firmly in his hands. He hadn't tasted homemade soup in years, and every sip was like being pulled into a memory. Laughter at a long wooden table, warmth spilling from a kitchen, a woman humming while she cooked. Memories of a home long gone, stolen by choices, by fate, by betrayals he hadn't yet shared with anyone. But tonight, a stranger had looked at him, not through him. And a child had told him not to be sad. Those words sank deeper than bread or soup. They stayed, stubborn, insistent, like a light refusing to be snuffed out. The next day, Claire crossed the same street, Lily skipping beside her, and her heart stuttered when she saw him again in the same spot. The thermos sat empty at his side, polished clean, as though he had valued it more than its contents. He looked up when they approached, not with the hollow gaze of yesterday, but with something steadier. "You came back," he said simply. Claire paused. "We live nearby," she replied, tone cautious. Lily grinned. "Hi again," she chirped, waving. Daniel smiled back, tentative, unfamiliar, but real. Claire handed over a paper bag with a sandwich inside. She told herself it was just food, nothing more, but her hand trembled slightly as he accepted it. She had no idea that each small act was binding them, thread by thread, into a story neither had expected. For Claire, it was a tug-of-war between compassion and self-preservation. She had too little to give, yet something in her heart told her she couldn't ignore him. For Daniel, every offering chipped away at the fortress he had built around himself, reminding him of a truth he had hidden for far too long. The emotional spark wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like embers glowing beneath ash. But in those embers, a fire waited. What Claire couldn't have known, what no one around them could have guessed, was that Daniel was not the man he seemed. Beneath the beard and worn clothes, he carried a name and fortune that could shift her world on its axis. And yet, in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was bread, soup, a smile, and the simple audacity of human connection. If you were in Claire's shoes, with only enough food for your child, would you have stopped for the stranger, or walked away? Comment your honest thoughts below. I want to know how you'd handle that moment. Daniel took another bite of the sandwich, his eyes never leaving Claire's face, as if searching for something he had lost a long time ago. Claire shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, tightening her grip on Lily's hand. She wasn't sure why his eyes unsettled her, maybe because they weren't empty, like most she had seen in his situation. They were alive, alert, almost studying. It made her feel as if she were the one exposed, not him. She cleared her throat and said softly, "Eat slowly. It'll last longer." Daniel gave a faint nod but didn't look away. "You didn't have to come back," he said. His voice was still rough, the words deliberate, like someone who wasn't used to speaking more than necessary. "I know," she replied quickly, almost too quickly. She started to step away, tugging Lily along, but her daughter stopped, tilting her head curiously at Daniel. "Why don't you have a home?" Lily asked bluntly, her small voice unfiltered by adult caution. Claire's heart lurched. "Lily," she hissed, embarrassed. Daniel didn't flinch. He set the sandwich down carefully, as if even the question deserved his full attention. "Because sometimes life takes things," he said after a pause. His eyes flickered, betraying something darker beneath. "Sometimes more than you think you can bear." Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to press him to understand, but she also wanted to protect herself. And Lily. They couldn't afford to get tangled in the story of a man who was just passing through her life. This, helping him with food, with warmth, this should have been enough. That night, as Claire tucked Lily into bed, her daughter whispered, "Mommy, are we gonna see him again?" Claire brushed hair from Lily's forehead, kissing her softly. "Probably not, sweetheart. We did what we could. That's all." But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her. Why had she said probably? Why did she feel that if she went down the street tomorrow, she'd find him right there? And she did. The third day, snow flurries danced in the air as Claire stepped out with Lily for errands. And there he was again, same corner, same wall. This time, when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition neither wanted to admit. Claire told herself not to stop. She walked faster, but Lily tugged her arm insistently. "Mommy, we can't just leave him." She exhaled sharply, torn between her daughter's innocence and the gnawing voice in her own head that whispered she was already too involved. Against her better judgment, she slowed, turned, and walked toward him again. "You're still here," she said, her tone edged with something between reproach and concern. Daniel smirked faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Where else would I be?" That answer stung more than she expected. She placed a small bag of fruit in his hands, muttering, "This can't keep happening. I don't have much either." "I know," he said quietly, holding the bag like it was fragile. "And that's why I don't understand you." Claire froze. "What do you mean?" "You don't have enough, but you give anyway." His gaze met hers steadily. "Most people walk by because they have too much. You're the opposite. Why?" She had no answer. At least, none she was willing to give. So she pulled Lily closer, murmured a goodbye, and hurried away, her pulse racing. That night, Claire sat on the couch, staring at the empty grocery bag. She hated the way his words lingered. Why was she helping him? Was it pity? Compassion? Or was it because looking into his eyes felt like looking into her own reflection? Someone who knew what it was to be invisible? Resistance bloomed inside her. She didn't want this. She didn't want him to matter. She didn't want the ache in her chest when she thought about him. She needed to protect Lily, and herself, from hope that went nowhere. Meanwhile, Daniel fought his own battle. Sitting under that same streetlight, he clenched his fists against the urge to wait for her. He shouldn't. He had built a life on walls, on secrets, on disappearing when things got too close. And yet, when she appeared, when her daughter's innocent eyes looked at him without judgment, the urge to disappear weakened. He told himself he would leave the city soon, that he couldn't let her peel back layers he'd buried under dust and dirt. But night after night, his feet betrayed him, carrying him back to that corner where she might pass. On the fourth day, Claire didn't stop. She crossed the street to avoid him, her chest tight with guilt as she hurried Lily along. But she couldn't resist one glance back. He was sitting there, head bowed, the untouched apple from yesterday still in his hand. The sight twisted something in her stomach. Lily noticed her mother's silence. "Mommy, he looked sad today." Claire's jaw tightened. "We can't save everyone, baby." Lily thought for a moment, then said softly, "But maybe we can save someone." The words cut deeper than Daniel's had. That night, Claire dreamed of hands, rough, cold hands clutching hers as though they were drowning. She woke with tears on her cheeks. Her resistance was cracking. Daniel's too. Because each time she appeared, it reminded him of the man he used to be. The man who hadn't always been hidden under dirt and rags. He tried to push her kindness away, tried to swallow it down with pride, but it slipped past every defense. And he hated it almost as much as he needed it. One evening, when Claire passed again, Daniel finally spoke more than a few words. "You shouldn't keep helping me." Claire stiffened. "Why not?" "Because I can't give anything back," he said simply, his voice heavy with an honesty that felt like confession. "And you deserve more than to keep pouring yourself out on someone broken." Claire's lips parted, but no words came. Resistance. From both of them. Each trying to push the other away, even as something fragile pulled them closer. Do you think Claire should keep helping Daniel, even when she barely has enough for herself? Or should she protect her own world and step back? Share your take. I'm curious what you would do. Claire turned away, her heart pounding, but for the first time since she met him, she felt the weight of his truth settle deep inside her bones, and it scared her. The next morning, a storm rolled in. Heavy snow blanketed the streets, the kind that slowed the city to a crawl. Claire bundled Lily up for school, though she hesitated at the door, staring at the swirling white. "Maybe we should stay home today," she murmured. But Lily insisted, reminding her of the school's Christmas recital rehearsal. Claire sighed, tugging her daughter's scarf tighter, and they stepped into the storm. The city was eerily quiet. Shops shuttered early, cars crawled along slick streets, and sidewalks lay half-buried in snow. As they reached the corner, Claire's breath caught. Daniel was there, though barely recognizable. His beard and hair were laced with frost, his shoulders hunched beneath a thin coat. He looked less like a man and more like a statue abandoned in the cold. Without thinking, Claire rushed forward. "You'll freeze out here," she exclaimed, her voice sharp with fear. Daniel's eyes opened slowly, hazy but still focused enough to register her presence. "I'll manage," he rasped, though his lips were pale and trembling. "No, you won't," Claire snapped, her heart racing. "Get up." He blinked at her, confused, then shook his head faintly. "Claire, I can't." "You can," she insisted, sliding the grocery bag she carried onto the snow and gripping his arm. "You're coming with me. Lily, hold the bag." The little girl nodded eagerly, scooping up the handles while Claire pulled at Daniel's arm. At first, he resisted, his pride stiffening like the ice on the sidewalk. But his body betrayed him, weak and sluggish from the cold. With a low groan, he let her help him to his feet. "Just until the storm passes," Claire said firmly, as if convincing herself more than him. Daniel didn't argue. He couldn't. His legs nearly buckled as they trudged through the snow, Claire's shoulder under his arm. He felt the heat of her body pressed against his, and for the first time in years, the cold wasn't the only thing he felt. Their apartment was small, worn, but warm compared to the streets. Claire ushered Daniel inside quickly, guiding him to the couch. He collapsed with a groan, steam rising from his soaked clothes. Lily giggled at the sight of him, leaving little puddles on the rug. Claire frowned, rushing to grab towels. "Don't laugh, Lily. He's freezing." "I'm not laughing," Lily said earnestly, her eyes wide. "I'm glad he's safe." Daniel turned his head toward the child, studying her as if she were something rare. "Thank you," he whispered again, his voice cracking. Claire returned with a stack of towels and draped them over his shoulders. "Take those boots off before you ruin my floor," she muttered, trying to mask the trembling in her hands. She wasn't sure if it came from anger at herself for letting him in, or fear of what it meant to have him here. Daniel obeyed silently, tugging at the worn laces. His socks were thin, damp, his skin red from exposure. Claire winced at the sight, her heart tugging despite her resistance. "Stay here," she said, disappearing into her bedroom. She returned with a pair of thick wool socks, her late father's, kept tucked away in a drawer. She tossed them onto his lap. "Put those on. They'll help." He stared at them, then at her. "You shouldn't give me this." "They don't fit me," she said curtly. "No point in keeping them." But the truth was different. Those socks were one of the few things she had left of her father. And yet, looking at Daniel's frozen feet, she couldn't not give them. Daniel slipped them on carefully, as though afraid to damage them. When he finally looked up, his eyes softened. "You keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Giving away pieces of yourself," he murmured. Claire's breath caught. She turned away, busying herself in the kitchen with making tea. As the kettle whistled, Lily climbed onto the couch beside Daniel, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Do you want to hold him?" she asked shyly, extending the toy. Daniel blinked, taken aback. Slowly, as if handling something sacred, he accepted the rabbit. His large, calloused hands dwarfed the toy, but he held it gently. "What's his name?" "Mr. Buttons," Lily said proudly. Daniel smiled faintly, the expression pulling at muscles unused to warmth. "Mr. Buttons," he repeated softly, almost reverently. Claire watched from the kitchen, her chest tightening at the sight. The way Lily leaned against him without hesitation. The way his rough edges softened, if only for a moment. It was dangerous. Too dangerous. She set the mugs of tea on the table and cleared her throat. "You can stay until the storm eases. Then you'll go back." Daniel nodded slowly, though a flicker of something, relief? Regret, flashed in his eyes. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You already have," Claire muttered, sitting across from him, wrapping her hands around her mug like a shield. Silence filled the room, broken only by Lily humming softly to Mr. Buttons. The hours dragged, the storm outside howling against the windows. Daniel dozed on the couch, exhaustion claiming him, while Claire sat awake in the dim light, watching. She studied the lines etched into his face, the way he frowned even in sleep, as though burdened by nightmares. Who was he, really? Why did she care? When he stirred awake, their eyes met across the room. Neither spoke for a long time, the air thick with unsaid words. Finally, Daniel whispered, "You shouldn't trust me." Claire's brow furrowed. "Why not?" "Because I don't even trust myself," he said simply, his voice low but steady. The honesty in his tone shook her. She should have told him to leave, should have put up walls. But instead she whispered back, "Then maybe it's time you did." The words hung between them, fragile, dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice. If you were Claire, would you have brought Daniel inside during the storm, or kept walking to protect your own world? Be honest, what would you have done? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear your side. The storm raged on outside, but inside the small apartment, something far more unsettling stirred between them, a fragile closeness that neither of them had wanted, yet both of them desperately needed. Claire sat at the small kitchen table, her fingers drumming against the chipped surface, listening to the rhythm of Daniel's breathing as he rested on the couch. She should have felt uneasy with a stranger in her home, but instead what gnawed at her was curiosity. He was too composed, too thoughtful for a man supposedly shattered by life. His words echoed, "You shouldn't trust me." Who says that unless they're hiding something? Daniel shifted, waking slowly. His gaze drifted to the bookshelf against the wall, a modest collection of second-hand novels and Lily's picture books. His eyes lingered on one in particular, a leather-bound copy of Great Expectations. He reached for it, running his fingers over the worn spine. "That was my father's," Claire said quietly, startling him. He looked up, caught. "He liked Dickens?" Daniel asked. Claire nodded, her eyes distant. He said Pip reminded him of himself. A boy who had nothing but dreamed of everything. Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. Your father was right. Pip thought wealth would fix the emptiness inside him. He was wrong. Claire tilted her head. You sound like you know. Daniel set the book down carefully, his thumb brushing its cover one last time. I do. For a moment, the silence between them stretched, heavy with the weight of truths unsaid. Finally, Claire leaned back, folding her arms. So what's your story? Because I don't believe for a second you're just another man who fell on hard times. His jaw tightened. He wanted to deflect, to hide behind the mask he had worn for years. But the warmth of the apartment, the innocent trust of Lily asleep in the next room, and the sharp honesty in Claire's eyes stripped him bare. I used to have everything, he said finally, his voice low. Money, status, power. All the things people chase. But I lost what mattered. Claire frowned. What was that? Daniel's eyes glistened, though he blinked the tears back quickly. Family. Love. The people who saw me as more than a number on a balance sheet. Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to ask more, but the raw pain in his expression silenced her. Instead, she whispered how. He swallowed hard. I made mistakes. Trusted the wrong people. Put ambition before connection. By the time I realized, it was too late. They were gone. The storm outside rattled the windows, but neither moved. Claire's heart pounded in her chest as she studied him. He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about grief. And for the first time, she saw him not as a stranger, but as someone who had once been whole, broken by choices and loss. Later that evening, as she washed dishes, Daniel rose from the couch and joined her at the sink. Let me help, he offered, reaching for a towel. You don't have to, she said softly. I want to. As he dried the plates, their hands brushed once, twice. Each time, Claire's chest tightened. She didn't want to feel this pull, didn't want to risk letting someone in again after all she had endured. But the more he spoke, the more the walls inside her cracked. Tell me about you, Daniel said suddenly, breaking the silence. Claire froze, then let out a bitter laugh. There's not much to tell. Try me. She set the last plate down, leaning on the counter. I married young. Thought I was building a fairy tale. Instead, I built a cage. He left when Lily was 3, left us with debt, empty cupboards, and more scars than I care to count. Daniel's hands stilled on the towel. I'm sorry, he said, his voice weighted with sincerity. She shrugged, though her eyes burned. We survived. That's all that matters. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the radiator. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice softer than before. Surviving is noble, but it's not living. The words cut deeper than she expected, because they were true. She had been surviving for years, never daring to imagine more. The storm stretched into the night. Lily woke crying from a nightmare, and Daniel, surprisingly, was the one to comfort her. He knelt beside her bed, his voice low and soothing, telling her a story about a brave rabbit who wandered through a snowstorm but found his way home because of the kindness of a little girl. Claire stood in the doorway, watching, her chest aching at the sight. Lily clung to his hand, her breathing evening out as she fell back asleep. Daniel lingered a moment longer, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's forehead with surprising tenderness. When he turned, he found Claire's eyes on him. They stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. She wanted to ask who had taught him to comfort like that, who had once been the child whose hair he brushed back with such gentleness. But she didn't. Some questions felt too dangerous to ask aloud. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded, his expression unreadable. But inside, something shifted. He hadn't allowed himself to feel this kind of connection in years. And now, in this tiny apartment, surrounded by peeling paint and secondhand furniture, he felt more at home than he had in all the mansions of his past life. The storm ended the next morning, leaving the streets buried under thick snow. Daniel stood by the window, staring out as the sun glinted off the icy rooftops. I should go, he said quietly. Claire stiffened. She had been expecting it, yet the thought of him leaving scraped raw against something inside her. Where will you go? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to her with a faint smile. Thank you for giving me more than food. You gave me a reminder. Her throat tightened. A reminder of what? That not all kindness is gone. The simplicity of his words broke something in her. She wanted to stop him, to ask him to stay longer, but fear held her tongue. Fear of need. Fear of loss. Fear of what she was starting to feel. So she let him gather the few things he had, watch as he slipped into the snow-covered street, his figure shrinking against the blinding white. But as she stood in the doorway, watching him disappear, she knew deep down that their story wasn't over. It couldn't be. If you were in Claire's shoes, alone, struggling, but finding comfort in someone with secrets, would you have let Daniel open up further, or would you have kept your distance? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. I'm curious what you'd do. Claire closed the door softly behind her, her hand lingering on the knob, her heart whispering a truth she wasn't ready to admit. She didn't want him to be just another passing shadow. The next few days unfolded like any other: work, errands, exhaustion. But Daniel's absence hung in the corners of Claire's world like an echo. She caught herself glancing at the street corner where he had first sat, half expecting him to reappear. Each time, her chest tightened with disappointment. She told herself it was silly. He was just a stranger. A man she had shown kindness to. But late at night, when Lily was asleep and the apartment fell silent, she realized she missed him. The way his voice carried gentleness despite the gravel in it, the way his presence had filled the room with a strange, unfamiliar safety. She wasn't the only one carrying that ache. Daniel wandered the city streets, dressed again in the tattered coat he had worn when she found him. To passers-by, he was just another faceless figure, another forgotten man against the winter backdrop. But inside, his thoughts were consumed by Claire and Lily. The warmth of their small apartment, the laughter that still echoed in his ears, the touch of innocence in Lily's small hand, it haunted him. For years, his wealth had given him anything he wanted. Yet for the first time, what he wanted most was something money couldn't buy: belonging. Fate, or something like it, pulled their paths together again. Claire was leaving her shift at the diner one evening, exhaustion weighing on her bones, when she spotted him sitting alone near the bus stop. His posture was hunched, his hair damp from falling snow, but when he lifted his head and their eyes met, something in her chest stirred violently. "You," she whispered, almost accusing, almost relieved. He stood quickly, brushing snow from his coat. "Claire." Her name on his lips sounded foreign, reverent, as though he had carried it in silence all this time. "You left," she said, though her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to stay gone," he admitted. "But I wasn't sure if I belonged in your world." Her laugh was soft, sad. "My world? Daniel, my world is rent checks, empty cupboards, and exhaustion. If you sat at my table, that's all you'd see." He stepped closer, shaking his head. "That's not what I saw. I saw strength. I saw a mother who would give her last meal to a stranger, who would build warmth out of scraps, who," his voice faltered, heavy with emotion. "I saw more heart in that apartment than I've ever seen in all my life." Her throat tightened, words caught in the swell of emotion. Before she could stop herself, she reached for his arm, fingers trembling as they brushed his sleeve. It wasn't much, but it was enough. From that night, something shifted. Daniel began to appear more often, sometimes waiting outside the diner, sometimes joining Claire and Lily for dinner. He never overstayed, never imposed, but each visit wove him deeper into their lives. Lily adored him, her laughter ringing brighter when he was near. He read her stories, made silly voices for the characters, and once even helped her build a fort out of blankets that turned the entire living room into a magical kingdom. Claire watched it all with cautious wonder. She found herself smiling more, laughing at things she hadn't noticed in years. Sometimes she caught Daniel looking at her, his gaze lingering too long, too tender, and it both terrified and thrilled her. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Claire found herself sitting on the couch beside him, their knees brushing lightly. She should have moved away, but she didn't. "You're good with her," Claire murmured. Daniel's eyes softened. "I had a little sister once. Much younger. She used to crawl into my bed when she had nightmares. I'd tell her stories until she fell asleep." Claire turned toward him. What happened to her? The flicker of pain in his eyes was immediate. He looked down, jaw tightening. "She died." A car accident. I was away on business, too caught up in chasing money. I wasn't there when she needed me. Claire's breath caught. She wanted to reach for his hand but hesitated, afraid to cross that invisible line between comfort and intimacy. Instead, she whispered, "I'm sorry." He nodded, his voice raw. "I've carried that guilt ever since. No amount of money could bring her back. But you, Claire, you reminded me what it feels like to matter. To have family again, even if just for a moment." The silence stretched, thick and trembling. Claire's heart raced, her thoughts a blur of fear and longing. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, that he had cracked open something inside her she thought was long dead. But survival had taught her to be cautious, to never lean too heavily on anyone. Yet when he reached out, his fingers barely grazing hers, she didn't pull away. Their hands rested together on the couch, tentative, trembling, but together. The moment was fragile, sacred. Neither spoke, but everything unspoken filled the room. Their wounds, their longing, their unspoken hope that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as alone as they thought. As days turned to weeks, their bond deepened. Daniel became part of their routines, helping with homework, fixing the leaky faucet, even teaching Lily how to fold paper cranes. Claire found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, memorizing the lines of his face, the softness in his eyes. One snowy afternoon, they took Lily to the park. Children ran laughing across the white expanse, their cheeks flushed with cold. Lily darted ahead, her laughter ringing through the air. Claire and Daniel walked side by side, their boots crunching against the snow. "She's happy," Daniel said softly, watching Lily twirl in the snowflakes. Claire smiled faintly. "She doesn't know the weight I carry. That's the point. Childhood should be light." Daniel turned to her, his voice low. "And who carries yours?" The question pierced her. She opened her mouth to deflect, to make a joke, but the sincerity in his gaze unraveled her defenses. "No one," she whispered. Without thinking, he reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as if they had always belonged that way. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade, the laughter of children, the cold bite of the air, even the weight of their pasts. All that remained was the quiet promise in their joined hands. That night, back in the apartment, Claire sat by the window after putting Lily to bed. Daniel stood beside her, both of them staring at the city lights flickering in the distance. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked softly. He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Claire exhaled slowly. "This. Us. You being here. It feels real, but also fragile, like it could vanish any second." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to tell her everything, that he wasn't who she thought, that the man she had welcomed into her life carried secrets that could shatter everything. But the words stuck in his throat. For now, all he could say was, "I don't want it to vanish." Her heart thudded painfully. She turned to him, their faces inches apart. The tension crackled, fragile and electric. For a breathless moment, it felt inevitable. Then Lily stirred in her room, breaking the spell. Claire pulled back quickly, her cheeks flushed. Daniel forced a small smile, stepping away. But the truth was clear. Undeniable. Whatever this was between them, it was growing. It was dangerous. And neither of them wanted to stop. Do you believe love can grow strongest in the hardest places, like Claire's struggling life, or does hardship make it impossible to truly open your heart? Share your take in the comments. I want to hear your perspective. Claire closed the curtain, her hands trembling, her chest tight, knowing she was standing on the edge of something beautiful and terrifying all at once. The days that followed carried a fragile sweetness, but beneath it, Claire felt the subtle tremor of something unsaid. Daniel was there more often than not, helping her patch cracks in the walls, making Lily laugh until she hiccuped, sitting with Claire in quiet companionship after long shifts. It felt almost like family, almost like safety. But Claire knew better than to trust the almost. Safety was always temporary. Happiness was always borrowed. That truth revealed itself one bitter Thursday evening. Claire was balancing the diner's register when she overheard two waitresses whispering by the counter. "Did you see that guy hanging around, Claire?" "The scruffy one of them said, smirking. "Yeah. Word is he's not even homeless. I heard someone saw him get into a car, an expensive one. A black sedan. Windows tinted. He's playing her watch." Claire froze, her chest tight. She wanted to dismiss it as gossip. But the way Daniel avoided certain questions, the way he sometimes slipped away with no explanation, suddenly the puzzle pieces began to press against each other in ways she didn't like. That night, when Daniel showed up at her door with Lily's favorite pastries, Claire tried to act normal. But suspicion coiled in her chest. She watched him as Lily pulled him into the living room, his smile easy, his laugh warm. But when his phone buzzed and he stepped outside to answer it, his voice low and urgent, the coil tightened into something sharp. She followed, barefoot on the cold floor, pressing her ear against the thin door. His words were muffled, but fragments slipped through. "I can't keep this up. Yes, I know she doesn't know yet. It's not that simple." Her breath caught. Not that simple. Doesn't know yet. Her pulse thundered in her ears. When he came back in, she forced a smile, but her hands trembled as she served dinner. She wanted to confront him right then, but Lily was there, her little eyes filled with trust and joy. So Claire swallowed the storm building inside her chest. Later, when Lily was asleep, Claire stood by the kitchen sink, arms crossed, her voice low but steady. "Daniel, who are you really?" He froze, halfway through pouring himself a glass of water. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean." Her voice sharpened, cutting through the silence. "You're not who you say you are. I've heard things. I've seen things. And I just heard you on the phone." Her throat tightened. "What's the truth?" Daniel set the glass down carefully, his jaw tense. "Claire, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" she demanded. "You've been in my home, with my daughter. I let you in because I thought I could trust you. But now I don't even know if you're who you say you are." His hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to tell her everything, but fear held him back. The fear that the moment his wealth came into the picture, everything they had would be poisoned. That she would see him not as a man, but as a checkbook. "Please," he said softly, desperately. "All that matters is what we've shared, what's real between us." Her eyes burned. Real? How can anything be real when it's built on lies? The words hit him harder than he expected, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. "Claire, I never lied about how I feel. Not once. But if I tell you the rest, I don't know if you'll ever look at me the same again." Her laugh was bitter, broken. "You think I look at you some perfect way now? Daniel, I've lived my whole life being left behind. By Lily's father, by my own family. I don't have the strength to invite someone in just to be fooled again." Daniel stepped closer, his voice thick with urgency. "I'm not here to fool you. I'm here because you matter more to me than anything has in years." But Claire shook her head, tears spilling now. "If that's true, then you would have trusted me with the truth from the start." The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel's heart pounded, every instinct screaming to confess everything right then. But fear silenced him once more. Claire saw it, the hesitation, the wall he refused to tear down, and that was enough. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You need to leave." Daniel's chest caved. He wanted to fight, to plead, but the pain in her eyes left no room for argument. He nodded stiffly, gathering his coat, his movements sharp with suppressed grief. He paused at Lily's door, his hand trembling against the frame, then forced himself to walk away. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Claire in the dim apartment, her sobs muffled against her hands. The days that followed felt like moving through ash. Claire went to work, took Lily to school, cooked dinners she could barely taste. But inside, she was hollow. Daniel's absence carved through her routines, making every corner of her life ache with emptiness. Lily noticed too. "Where's Daniel?" she asked one evening, her wide eyes full of innocence. Claire forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He had to go, sweetheart. But he promised he'd read me another story." Claire's chest broke all over again. "I know, baby. Sometimes people make promises they can't keep." Lily frowned. But he's not like Daddy. He wouldn't just leave. Claire turned away quickly, blinking back tears. She couldn't explain betrayal to a child who still believed in the goodness of people. Meanwhile, Daniel spiraled. He returned to his penthouse, the city skyline sprawling beyond the glass windows, but the view felt empty, suffocating. His wealth surrounded him, marble floors, imported wine, silent staff, but none of it mattered. The memory of Claire's trembling voice, of Lily's laughter, haunted every room. He had fled the one place that felt like home, and now he was more homeless than he had ever been. The shatterpoint came one evening when Claire returned from work, bone-tired, only to find Lily sitting by the window, clutching a paper crane Daniel had folded for her. "Mom," she whispered, her little voice heavy with a sadness too big for her years, "did Daniel stop loving us?" The question split Claire's heart wide open. She dropped to her knees, pulling Lily into her arms, but she couldn't find an answer. Because deep down, she wasn't sure herself. What do you think hurts more, discovering someone lied about who they are, or losing them because they're too afraid to tell you the truth? I'd love to hear your take in the comments. Claire held Lily tighter, tears streaming down her face, realizing she might have just lost the one man who had ever truly seen her. That night, long after Lily had fallen asleep, Claire sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper crane her daughter had left on the counter. Its delicate folds carried a weight she could hardly bear. She ran her fingers over its fragile wings and whispered into the silence, "Why couldn't you just tell me the truth, Daniel?" Her chest ached with conflict. Part of her wanted to forget him, to protect herself and Lily from another abandonment. But another part, the part that still felt the warmth of his hand in hers, the steadiness of his voice when he read to Lily, longed for him, for the chance that maybe he hadn't lied to hurt her, but out of fear. In his penthouse across the city, Daniel sat with a glass of untouched whiskey, staring out at the glittering skyline that mocked him with its emptiness. For years, he had believed money was a shield, a wall between himself and disappointment. Yet now, surrounded by every luxury, he felt poorer than ever. The silence in his apartment pressed against his ears, and Claire's voice echoed in his memory, "If that's true, then you would have trusted me with the truth from the start." He had to decide, continue hiding behind the life he despised, or risk everything by revealing the truth. The choice gnawed at him, every hour stretching into torment. 3 days later, Claire left work late. Snow had begun to fall again, dusting the streets in white. As she rounded the corner toward her apartment, she stopped short. Daniel was standing there, waiting. Not in tattered clothes, not with downcast eyes, but in a dark wool coat that fit him perfectly, his hair trimmed, his presence commanding in a way she had never seen before. Her heart lurched painfully. She wanted to run to him and scream at him all at once. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tight. His eyes softened, vulnerable despite the confidence his appearance suggested. "I came to tell you the truth." She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "It's too late." "No," he said firmly, stepping closer. "It's only too late if I walk away now." He paused, gathering himself. "My name is Daniel Harrington. I'm not homeless. He swallowed, the words heavy. "I'm a billionaire. My family built an empire, and I've spent years running it. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. Everyone I met only saw my money, not me. So I walked away from it all, just to see if anyone could look at me and see a man, not a wallet." Claire's body went rigid, her heart pounding. The truth slammed into her like a wave. Billionaire. Empire. All this time, while she had been counting pennies and skipping meals to feed her daughter, he had been sitting on a fortune she couldn't even imagine. She turned away, fury and heartbreak twisting together. "You let me believe you were homeless. You let my daughter believe in you. All while you were living in a palace." His voice cracked. "I didn't plan it, Claire. I didn't sit down and say, I'll trick her. I was lost. And then I met you. You gave me food when you had none to spare. You gave me kindness with no reason to. For the first time in years, I felt human. I didn't tell you because I was terrified it would ruin everything. And now it has." She pressed a trembling hand against her forehead, her chest heaving. "You don't get it, Daniel. I've been lied to before. I've been abandoned. I can't risk that again, not with Lily. I won't let her heart break the way mine has." His eyes glistened. "Claire, I swear to you, I would never abandon her. Or you. Not now. Not ever." The snow fell heavier, muffling the world around them, leaving only the raw truth between them. Claire's heart screamed for her to run, to lock the door and never look back. But beneath the fear, another voice whispered, "He never stopped choosing you." Even when it cost him everything. The next morning, Claire sat at the diner counter after her shift, staring into her coffee. Her coworker slid onto the stool beside her. "You look like someone carrying a whole war on her shoulders," she said lightly. Claire gave a bitter laugh. "Something like that." The woman studied her for a moment. "Sometimes the hardest thing isn't knowing what's right. It's daring to believe you deserve it." The words hit Claire like a stone dropped into a still pond. Did she believe she deserved love? Did she believe she deserved someone who might actually stay? That evening, she found herself standing outside Daniel's building, her breath clouding the air as she stared up at the tall glass tower that reached into the clouds. She almost turned back twice. But then she thought of Lily asking if Daniel had stopped loving them, and her feet carried her forward. The doorman greeted her politely, and when Daniel opened his door, his eyes widened with shock and hope. "I shouldn't be here," Claire said quickly, her arms folded as if to hold herself together. "Then why are you?" His voice trembled. She hesitated, tears threatening. "Because I don't know if I can trust you. But I know I don't want to live without trying." The air between them fractured with emotion. Daniel stepped forward, his hand lifting hesitantly before cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you can." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, her body finally surrendering to the truth she had fought so hard to deny. She wanted him. Not his money. Him. In that moment, a choice crystallized for both of them. Claire chose to risk her heart again, despite the scars. Daniel chose to tear down the walls his wealth had built around him and offer her his most vulnerable truth. For the first time, they weren't running from their pasts. They were walking toward a future neither had believed possible. If you were Claire, would you take the risk of trusting Daniel again after discovering his secret, or would you protect your heart at all costs? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. Claire's hand slipped into his, fragile but deliberate, sealing a choice that would change both their lives forever. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if he were afraid to breathe and break the spell. The weight of her hand in his was light, but it anchored him in a way no empire, no company, no fortune ever had. He opened his eyes, and for the first time in years, he smiled without pretense. "Thank you," he whispered, not because she had forgiven him, but because she had chosen not to give up on him. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding. Claire did not simply fall into his arms and forget the betrayal. Trust was not a switch she could flick. But Daniel didn't run. He showed up at the diner every morning, sitting in her section with a quiet patience that spoke louder than any apology. He walked Lily home from school, never late, never distracted. He fixed the leaky faucet in her kitchen without her asking. Small gestures, daily proofs that his words had not been empty. One evening, Claire stood in the doorway, watching him kneel on the floor as Lily perched on his shoulders, giggling as she braided his hair with mismatched ribbons. The sight pulled something deep inside her, a tenderness she had tried to bury under years of survival. When Daniel looked up and caught her gaze, he didn't grin or smirk. He simply gave her a look that said, "I'm here. I'm not leaving." That night, as they cleaned up Lily's mess of ribbons and crayons, Claire broke the silence. "You know this doesn't erase the lie, right?" Daniel nodded, his hand stilled over the crayon box. "I know. I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But I'm not asking for you to forget it, Claire. I'm asking for the chance to keep proving I can be better than the man who hid from you." Her throat tightened, but she nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was a beginning. Winter melted into spring, and with it came a subtle shift in their world. Daniel invited her and Lily to see his world, not the boardrooms or the penthouses, but the quiet places he had kept hidden. He took them to the greenhouse his mother had loved, long abandoned but still filled with wild vines and stubborn blossoms. He showed Lily how to press her hands into the soil, her laughter ringing through the glass. Claire watched, her heart caught between awe and disbelief, as Daniel knelt beside her daughter, sleeves rolled up, dirt smudged on his face. This was not the mask of a billionaire. This was the man she had met in the snow, the one who had looked at her with gratitude instead of arrogance. But the true resolution came one evening in late May. The three of them sat on a blanket in the park, the air sweet with blooming lilacs. Lily had fallen asleep with her head in Claire's lap, a book still open in her small hands. Daniel lay on his side, watching them with a tenderness that left Claire breathless. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn object. "Do you remember this?" he asked softly, placing it in her hand. Claire opened her palm to find the paper crane Lily had given him the first day they met. Its edges were bent, the fold soft from being carried, but it was intact. Her breath caught. "You kept it." "I kept it because it reminded me what real kindness looks like," Daniel said, his voice low. "It reminded me of the woman who gave me food when she had none to spare. It reminded me that love isn't bought, it's given." He hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "Claire, I don't want to live behind lies anymore. I don't want to hide. I want to build something real, with you, with Lily. If you'll let me." Her chest swelled with 1,000 emotions, fear, hope, love. She looked down at Lily's sleeping face, then back at Daniel, and for the first time she let herself imagine a future not defined by scarcity or abandonment, but by presence. She placed her hand over his, folding the paper crane between them. "We'll take it one day at a time." "But yes, Daniel. I'll let you." Tears glimmered in his eyes, and he leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. It wasn't a grand kiss, not a cinematic flourish, but a quiet, reverent promise. Summer brought new rhythms. Daniel didn't sweep her into a life of luxury overnight. Instead, he asked what she wanted. He invested in Lily's school fund quietly, never making it feel like charity. He invited Claire to help renovate the old greenhouse into a community space, a project that became their shared dream. And little by little, Claire stopped bracing herself for the day he might vanish. She stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. On the anniversary of the night they met, Daniel walked Claire and Lily down the same snowy street. The air was crisp, just as it had been, though now it carried laughter instead of loneliness. He stopped outside the diner, turned to Claire, and said, "You changed my life when you gave me that sandwich. You thought it was nothing. But to me, it was everything. I don't ever want to stop being the man who deserves that kind of love from you." This time, Claire didn't hold back. She kissed him, not tentative, not afraid, but with the certainty of a woman who had chosen love at last. And as Lily tugged at their hands, giggling, the three of them walked forward together, not broken pieces trying to survive, but a family, stitched together by compassion, truth, and the courage to believe they deserved happiness.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this story moved you, the next one will hit even deeper. It's more gripping, more unexpected, and waiting for you right now. Don't hesitate. Click the video on your screen, and I'll see you in the next story.